All right, everyone. This is our first episode being recorded in the year 2021. We are so excited to be joining you today as we begin a new era. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is ChooseFI. All right, guys, let's go ahead and hop right into it. We kicked the year off right. We had JL Collins joining us this past week on Monday and kind of refreshing us on the stock series. I think this is kind of the gateway for many people in this community to finding this idea of keeping investing simple. We don't have inside information. We don't know who the winners and the losers are. It's very hard, when you're looking forward to be able to figure that out, to have information that's reliable. And the cool thing about that is historically over basically any, 20, 30, 40-year period of time, it looks like simpler outperforms complexity. And so we wanted to go into more depth, and I think JL Collins really set that up for that. I'm excited to go back to this conversation and follow up with a couple additional ideas. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Happy New Year, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited we made it. You survived 2020. I have a feeling those T-shirts are going to be popular.
Yeah, as we titled this, a new era, right? Let's hope onward and upward here in 2021. There are obviously hopeful signs in a lot of senses. So, yeah, it's exciting. And Jonathan, it's funny. I was just thinking, I guess this is going into our 5th year of the podcast, right? We've had 4 full calendar years, and this is our 5th year. It's kind of mind-boggling to think that it's been around that long.
You ever thought about like, not sharing super numbers here, like showing numbers at a granular level, but like our own personal finance journey and personal development journey over the last 5 years, and then also that of our audience, those individuals that have been with us for 5 years, those that have been with us for three, two, maybe some people just found us this year. So how much progress have you made over the past year? But for me, when we started, I was still paying off all my student loan debt. This was more of like an aspirational goal to pursue financial independence. It started by cleaning up all the student loan debt that I had incurred going to pharmacy school. So I'm trying to remember where I was when we actually started the show. I think I still had probably 40 or $50,000 in student loan debt left. I believe I paid it off kind of midway through that first year. And now I'm kind of tracking my own personal finance journey and realizing that I'm well on my path to financial independence. And it was incremental. It's not like some home run where it just like suddenly happened, but it was like making these small changes and having wealth work for me instead of debt working against me. It's just been incredible. But it really was that aggregation of marginal gains. And I know you've seen a version of that in your own life, even though when we started the show, clearly on your personal finance journey, you were a little bit farther along than I was. You've seen something similar.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, I've seen it in every aspect of my life. I can't say that I've ever hit a home run in any way, right? In finance, in self-improvement, in anything, really, right? Like it's it's this little incremental growth, as you put it. It's almost like plotting growth. Like if you looked at like
We are
what
like
my life looks like.
mediocrity incarnate.
Yeah. But yet we've carved out these amazing lives for ourselves. And so many people in this community have by doing something simple, right? Like obviously on the face of it, mediocrity incarnate doesn't sound like an aspirational goal or a bumper sticker for the community, but I mean that's what it feels like a regular life. And I think that really for so many of us, when we get into this concept, it's almost surprising at how little the changes are that make massive differences when, as you said, compounded together. And I got an email from Aaron, and he said, "Happy New Year, former FI skeptic." And he goes on to say that he made these little changes. He said he was wound up to you through a recommendation of his friend Dominic Cortuccio, which is cool. And he said, "I wanted to start small before jumping in the FI pool. So I looked for fees and lost money as a first step." And it's just these little things. He actually found out something shocking. He said that his employer was supposed to match a certain percentage of his retirement, and they weren't doing it. And he actually was the one who uncovered this. And then he said, "We're meeting realtors about renting our second home so we can turn a 7K operating cost into a $20,000 positive." And then he said, "Happy to have found you. Keep up the good work. I feel that I am proof that you can dabble, quote, in the FI pool and still reap the benefits, which is great for those who may find it too daunting. And Jonathan, I think if you and I can pat ourselves in the back about anything with this podcast, like maybe the singular thing is that we show that there's nothing daunting about FI at all. There's nothing about deprivation. There's nothing about eating brown bananas. There's nothing about living this terrible life to save 90% just so you can reach FI. This is about living a better life. And it's about doing that while living arguably the same or maybe even a better life in the process. Just being intentional. And you can dabble. I dabble. That's the funny thing was my response. Like I dabble in the FI pool. And yet I'm this podcast host. Like I don't feel that I've done anything extraordinary. And I think that is the best calling card for FI.
I love that, like, years later, the fact that a paper really latched onto the brown banana as a headline has, like, irritated to the point that you gotta, like, bring it back up.
Oh, it annoys me so much. It really does. Yeah.
One person in the community talks about how when they have brown bananas, they make banana bread. And what paper was it that decided to lead with "FI community, the community of brown bananas"? And Brad's like, "I will
I
take
think
you
it was the
down."
Washington Post, but I'm not
Washington
positive.
Post. Washington Post. Shame on you. Where is journalistic integrity? Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, dude. I think that, we have this comment that there is no they. There's just you. And I think that that is largely a true statement in terms of we need to control what we can control. We have to go with wherever we are, we got to figure out what can we do inside of those parameters. But I will say that historically over the last 30, 40 years, it feels like there are structural things that have kind of stacked against us. In particular, I'm looking at the ever increasing cost of mortgages in many parts of the country, where if you were to buy a home, you're basically choosing between having a place to hang your hat and being able to save money. You came from Long Island, New York. It's just prohibitively expensive in some of these high cost living areas. We look at student loan debt. You want to get a great degree and you want to be able to get access to great jobs, then you're going to need to take out 60, 80, 100, 200, $500,000 of student loan debt. We've interviewed a person that had $500,000 of student loan debt. You're basically choosing between a great career and financial solvency in that scenario. And then on top of that, when you stack the fact that we don't teach financial literacy in school, only now, within the last maybe 24 months, 12 to 24 months, are we really seeing an outcry enough to actually move the needle. We will happily encourage you to take out loans at any cost. That's always going to work out. And we'll kind of preach that mantra for decades to the point that any person that's like 18 years old, they're ready to sign any number to get a degree at any cost, no matter how much student loan debt need to finance. But we don't talk about compound interest calculations. Brad, you've alluded to the fact constantly that what blew your mind and really set you on this track. There were a couple big ideas, but one of them was you understood how compound interest worked, and not just at a theoretical mathematical level, but actually how it would affect your ability to control your destiny and your finances. That was massive. We don't teach that to kids in school, and we certainly don't teach it in a way that allows them to see that these small decisions made early on will drastically affect the outcome. That's three very, very tiny examples. There may be others that individuals can latch onto, but these three things are big. And if we can, in some way, in a non-intimidating way, break down the barriers and make that conversation easier to have, and have people realize, like, maybe we can, we can't completely change the system, but maybe we can optimize at the margins. And in doing so, we can reclaim decades of our life. And this is kind of where we have made the choice to make our stand, to have our small impact in the world, is to say, what does it look like to give you strategies and tools to reclaim space, reclaim bandwidth? And what we find is when you can stack enough of these together, it's not just small gains that are made. We're talking about you being able to reclaim decades of your life, your best years, not just your golden years, your best years, and put them into what lights you up, what drives you, what motivates you. I mean, that's our calling, man. That's why we're here.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. And I got lucky finding the concept of compound interest. Just extraordinarily lucky that my aunt happened to be an administrative assistant for, at that point, a stockbroker. And I got this internship and he showed me compound interest. It was this just fortuitous accident. And I think what we're trying to make obvious to everyone is the power of these concepts. And I think that's what's so cool about this community, right? And certainly not just this podcast, but this community is that we are all trying to spread this message. And I think that's critical. And Jonathan, you talk about like small things over time. There was this amazing Facebook post from Jessica that I'd love to read if you'll indulge me here. So she said, I did the impossible. I remember at 19 years old when my boss asked me to set a goal, and all I wanted was $5,000 to my name so I would feel stable. It took me 9 years to get there. Through my early 20s, I lived paycheck to paycheck with zero idea of how to save and fell into an addiction that drove me physically, psychologically, and financially into a negative I thought I would never surmount. At 26 years old, my grandmother had to sit me down and teach me how to balance a checkbook, pay myself first, and give myself an allowance. The entry below in my notepad savings tracker on 11/26/2015 was the first time I ever saved. As you can see, it was a slow process at the start. But since discovering the ChooseFI podcast, I've drastically reduced my expenses, paid off all my remaining debts, started investing, increased my savings rate to 52%, and hit this new marker milestone of $100,000 net worth. I've gone from an income of 28K a year to over 60K. I've made sacrifices such as living with a roommate that drives me absolutely nuts to keep my living expenses low and working different part-time jobs in addition to my full-time job to get there. I'm going to school so eventually I won't have to work so hard to make what I do. I just want to give hope to anyone who is starting off when it seems absolutely impossible because you can't keep a penny to your name and life circumstances just seem to be out to get you. Just remember to not give up. There is a way. Brad and Jonathan, I cannot put into words what your podcast has done for my life and the lives of friends around me who are willing to get on board when I tell them about your message. In one of my classes in a practice on gratitude, I had to write a thank you note to the person who had made the greatest impact on my life. And I wrote a letter to you two. I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. Your podcasts keep me focused, motivated, and on track to achieving the life I always wanted. I mean, goodness, Jonathan, how obviously you can tell from my voice how impactful that is. That's I've read that multiple times and it still gets me. It's that is what we see. I mean, we see that from this community, right? Like that's the power of this concept. And like we've always said, this has nothing to do with us. We're just the messengers. We're two guys who like to chat into a microphone, and for whatever reason, people listen. But it's the message, right? That's the critical key, and it's the getting off the couch and taking action. Like Jessica, even when life circumstances seem to be out to get you, or you think that it's impossible, or you've always been told you're going to be poor, you can't imagine being wealthy. Like there's a way, and it starts brick by brick.
And I would even say go so far as to say, Brad, we're standing on the backs of giants. I mean, we're just bringing this information together to try to tell a story with it and motivate and encourage people to take action on it. But it's not our information. It's not something that we created out of thin air. It's people have been doing this work in this space. Probably now, I would say in the FI community, this movement has been building since the 1960s. Kind of took a little pause, came back really hard in the 1990s. People were just talking about the concept, the idea, the strategies to do it changed over time. And to some degree, they will continue to change as the tax code changes, as the structure changes, as the obstacles change. Those change over time. But this community has been very selfless in sharing that information without real financial gain, freely putting the information together based on personal experience, academic studies, historical data, and really giving you the best shot of DIYing your investments. Whereas historically, the model was you needed to have someone help you. And frankly, they would help you out of all of your money consistently over time because it was just way too complicated for you to understand. Now, with truth seekers, we look through all the data and we look for what's conflicting and what makes sense for us. We look at the landscape and we try to make the best decision for us. And there are a lot of patterns that you see over time. One of those patterns is that people that are in high fee funds over time get destroyed. They just do not keep up with average market returns. Another pattern that we see is that those that don't know how compound interest work end up paying it, and a lot of it. Right? So you can either know how it works and earn it, have it benefit you, or you can not know how it works. And it's not like it just doesn't affect you, it works against you in a massive, massive way. And these are just a couple of these big ideas, and then you got to kind of bring it in from different spaces. Like, all right, so now we've talked about, all right, we know how compound interest works, and I'm sitting on this cash that I've finally been able to save for the first time. But cash in my coffee can, Brad, as we've done, it's not good enough. It is not good enough to have $100 in your coffee can that you've saved there from 1902. It would give you the same purchasing power as about $2. You could purchase the same amount for $2 to $5 in the early 1900s as you can with $100 today. It's not good enough just to put your money under a mattress. So then, okay, I'm trying to do better. I need to do better. What is my best path? Investing is scary. It's so scary. And JL Collins has done us an incredible service by taking work that other individuals have done and been able to tell a very compelling story around it that's proven out both by historical data, common sense, academic studies. I mean, it's just the stock series is an incredible body of work. And that's what we were talking about this past Monday.
Yeah, you're right. And I always kind of look at people's motivations behind why they do what they do. And that's why I really am so impressed with Jim in that this was never about certainly getting famous for him. You know, he wouldn't have named his website jlcollinsnh.com if he thought anyone was going to read it. This was about preparing something for his daughter who wasn't listening to him at the time, as you know, many
She is now.
sons and daughters are might do from time to time. But this was, hey, I have this information. I want to present it to my daughter. And, then you see someone like Warren Buffett, who is one of, if not the single best investor of all time. And as I mentioned in that episode with JL, Warren Buffett plans to leave 90% of his estate in a low cost index fund. So that is to safeguard. Obviously, he doesn't have to worry about safeguarding his wife's future with many billions. But again, you look at what are people doing in their own lives, not do as I say, not what I do. Right? Like there's so many people out there that just pontificate about things and stand and yell, and then you see them doing something the polar opposite. And I think that's another reason why I'm so impressed with this concept of index fund investing is you see people actually walking the walk. And I think for me, and as Jim said, it's not just about taking the simple path, right? It's not shutting your brain off and saying, "Oh, this is easy, so I'll just stick with it." There is ample evidence that again, over a long time period, right? Over a short time period, crazy things happen. That's just the way it works. There are certainly funds that are going to outperform over 1, 3, 5, even 10 years, maybe. They're vanishingly few over 10 years, but there are still some. But over 30, 50 plus years, owning the entire market or certainly the S&P 500 or if you do total stock market index and keeping your fees low and not trading in and out, not dancing in and out as Jim likes to say, that will provide you, in my estimation and in the estimation of many, the highest likelihood. Nothing's a certainty. I think that's what another critical thing. Nothing in life is a certainty. But I believe, based on what I've seen and read, that this type of investing, that investing in low cost, broad based index funds, will give me the highest likelihood of success over a 50-year period. And it's just icing on the cake that it also happens to be simple, right? That I don't have to do hundreds or thousands of hours of research or get lucky and find that one financial advisor who's brilliant, right? Like you can't make a plan based on luck. You can make a plan based on, all right, this is going to work over 50 years.
I mean, and this is the game, right? Like we like to think that we are rational human beings. And you got to imagine that would apply to advisors and to fund managers and everything else. I mean, anytime that you have a person making active choices to get in and to get out of the market, to buy certain companies, to sell certain companies, they're making rational decisions based on the information that they have. They're interpreting it and they're coming up with a thesis. And based on that, they're making a decision to get in or to get out. But the problem is, has been proven over the last 100 years, the market, and this is a quote, but I can't attribute it right now, but I'm not claiming credit for it. The market can stay irrational. The market can stay irrational longer than most people can stay solvent. right? It's almost like the market, and Jim said this, the market goes out of its way to embarrass as many people as possible. It's perverse. I don't it's insane. But what it means practically is that the only way to win is to not play the game. And I don't mean not play the game as in keep your money in the coffee can. I mean, you don't have all the information. And even if you do, largely the rationale, the thesis is going to lead to the wrong decision. Or at least the timeline will not match up with the timeline you need. And so, and so in that case, if the market can stay irrational longer than you can say solve it, how can you not play the game and still win? Index fund investing allows you to do that. There's something that Jim said in there that I don't think any of us fully appreciate the way that we should, and it should give us a lot of confidence. He talked about the self-cleansing nature of the index fund. Some people suggest, well, two things that we talked about in the episode. We really tried to hit that episode that you need to listen to. I think it's 284, so go listen to that for some context on this. We try to talk about it. JL, why wouldn't we just pick the winners and avoid the losers? And JL rightly said, well, you can't. I mean, you could try, and you might be able to do it some of the time, not all the time, but consistently, it's incredibly difficult to do it over the long term. The other option is, well, why can't you just build your own index? And again, you could, let's say there's 500 companies in the S&P 500. You could find out what those 500 companies are. You could use something like M1, and you could get the right percentages, and then do something along those lines, or do the total stock market index fund. Has 3,000 companies. Just pick all the ones you really want and leave the ones you don't want out, and then you have your own custom index. But you lose the self-cleansing nature when you do that. You're basically locking in a percentage that you would then need to update based on what's actually happening in the market. It would fall apart on that regards. When you purchase something like VT, I've been thinking about this a lot. VTSAX or Total Stock Market Index Fund, as we mentioned. If the worst possible case scenario happened and 30% of the companies just disappeared, completely disappeared. When you're doing this on your own, when you're picking these companies, you're toast. Those companies have absolutely gone to zero. Your money that you had invested in them has gone to zero. It's scary. It's very damaging. When you have a self-cleansing index like we just talked about, as these companies diminish in value, either quickly or over time, the money that you are contributing, the money you having toward that is decreasing as a percentage as well. The index actually takes care. It's incredibly elegant, and I don't completely understand it. We need to have Rick Ferry on, or someone that really was kind of behind the scenes on this that can help us appreciate it even more. But your ownership of these companies is decreasing as the company's value is going down as well. And as you're making new contributions, you're purchasing less and less of them. This is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly elegant, and it works to your benefit. Think about this. We were using, Brad, I think we were using the Dow as an example in the episode, and we said, how many of the companies that were all the top companies and like 1901 or 1920 or whenever they started with this Dow, how many of those companies are still in existence today and are still being listed on this Dow? And Brad, it was like zero. The entire thing has turned over, which means all of those companies that were on there have either gone bankrupt, disappeared. Companies have a shelf life. They do. They come and they go. They rise to incredible heights and then they disappear. And and in an index, you protect yourself in that, while even if it's happening, if the market's going down, when you buy, you're also buying companies that are about to replace them. They're about to, because you haven't done the research. You don't know what those companies are, but you're buying them while they're still at very small levels, and those carry you over time. And if we look historically, it's approximated 8 to 10% for the last 100 years. It's crazy. Now we don't know that it'll do that again, but we have history on our side to say that if we can just own the market, winners and losers, without having to worry about picking them, we're going to crush it. And if the market tanks, goes down 30, 40%, but you're still dollar cost averaging, making your contributions, you are buying the market on sale. And when the market comes back, which it inevitably will, I don't know timeline, 1 year, 2 year, whatever, you have been able to buy a disproportionate shares compared to what you were getting when it was at its all-time high just a couple months ago. If you can grasp that concept and realize the power of that, it puts steel in your spine when black swan events like what we just experienced, or what I'm sure we will experience in the future, happen again. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and black swan events aren't quite so black swan, right? That's what Jim talks about in his book and in his stock series that we see, well, I mean, maybe this obviously COVID 2020, that was something that's not going to happen or has not happened once a decade, certainly by any means. But there are drops in the stock market of 10% virtually every year. There are drops of 30% every couple of years. Like these aren't unusual things. And I think when you are a student of history and you realize this is normal, this is part of, I need to stay the course and I can't freak out, right? That I can't just sell and say the sky is falling. And Jonathan, to your point, put it in a coffee can and see the purchasing power of that just whittle away year after year. Like that is not a strategy for long term success. So I think it's critical that we understand that there are ups and downs, and you have to just understand that and stay the course and keep investing. Like you were saying, when it drops 30% and you're buying shares, you're getting the same companies on a sale price, right? Stocks are the one thing that people seem to not like to buy on sale, right? It's this odd psychological phenomenon that we love to buy things when everybody else is buying it in the market, right? Like it's crazy. And you see that kind of irrational exuberance drive prices up. And then it's like, okay, we all look around and what have we been doing? As opposed to there's real money to be made when prices drop. I mean, if you had the guts or the spare cash and the guts, let's say, in March or April of 2020 to have invested significantly, I mean, what would your return be right now? Right. But and I'm not advocating that strategy. Obviously, that's the polar opposite of what I'm talking about. But I'm saying if let's say you just happen to be someone who got their first job around March of 2020, and you're probably thinking, oh no, the sky is falling. Should I be investing?
Because play it out logically, right? The person's like, "Well, I wanna see what happens with COVID. I wanna wait till the vaccine is in place, or I wanna whatever." That person is like, "I need to know with absolute certainty that everything's okay before I get started." What did that what did that cost them?
Right. And absolute certainty. What an interesting phrase, right? There's no absolute certainty. Here's the aha moment for all of us. There's no absolute certainty in anything. There's just not. It's the way it works. It's the way life works. And if that person would have been investing, who knows, 10, 20% of their income into low cost index funds in March, April, May, just keep on doing that, they would look back and say, wow, this really does work. This concept makes sense, right? And so many of us who went through this and saw our net worths drop dramatically, but then over the course of this year, come right on back, roaring back. And that's not to say this was preordained, right? This was how it was always going to be. None of us could have known that in March. There was no way to know that. But what I could have said with a fair degree of certainty that, in March of 2020, if you asked me 10 years from now, are we going to be below where we are now or above all-time highs? I would have, with a fair degree of certainty, a significant degree of certainty, said, of course we're going to be above. That's the inexorable climb of the economy.
Mm.
And I think that is a hopeful message. It really is. And, again, to your point, Jonathan, it's you put those regular contributions in. You put them in when things are going well, you put them in when things are going poorly, and you get these companies on sale, and you just keep on doing it year after year, decade after decade, and you're going to wake up a very, very wealthy person.
I wanted to go back and talk about the coffee can for a second because I think it is kind of interesting. What we're, it just seems like to some degree the way the winds have shifted, and I don't know what to make of it yet. But I noticed a comment that you posted on Facebook under Jared Casaza. He writes at fifthwheelpt.com. I'll have to double check that, but he's a traveling physical therapist, and he's been able to pay off a lot of debt and make significantly more than his peers by him and his fiance pursuing this travel physical therapist lifestyle. And the reason I bring that up is the post that you commented on was actually a post that he had done talking about cryptocurrencies and why he is bullish on them. His specific one that he was talking about in this case was Bitcoin. Bitcoin, for many people, has been on another tear. If you guys remember, there was a lot of Bitcoin mania that was going on right around December of 2017. You couldn't bump into a telephone pole without the telephone pole telling you about how Bitcoin was going to change the world. And then Bitcoin crashed and went down to like $3,000, and suddenly everybody stopped talking about it. And now this year, it does seem like it's on another tear. And now those numbers are up closer to like 30,000, 37,000. It's just some absurdly high numbers. And simultaneous to that, I think a lot of us, in maybe more the traditional finance space, are trying to figure out what this is. And then two, we're also, recognizing that our own currency has lost value, right? So we have a fiat currency. What does that mean? I think definition of terms are, and I'm not an expert in the space. I'm not an economist. This is not my wheelhouse, but just as a user of the fiat currency, I feel like I should be able to talk about it for a second. Our currency is backed by the confidence of the federal government. That's it, right? So we have a Federal Reserve that prints money and gives it to our government to use. Our government pays that back with some level of interest, I guess. And the confidence that we have in this dollar is basically it's backed by our confidence in our government. In fact, the United States dollar for the last I don't know how many years to some degree actually has actually been a world currency, a reserve currency around the world. It is a lot of confidence in our currency. A lot of people buy our debt, they buy our bonds, they buy our treasuries because the United States has been a global force for decades now. And we pay our debts. Our debts grow, but we pay them. But it is worth pointing out that, like going back to our coffee can, $100 today is not worth what $100 was worth back in 1902 or 1910 or 1915. And parallel to that, we also know that whenever you hear the word stimulus money, we are injecting money into our economy. There are more dollar bill. Like it's not. It makes sense that our money is worth less than it was in 1902. The simple word for that is inflation. But what does inflation mean? It means that in 1902 there were a certain number of dollar bills, $100 bills. Whatever. There's a certain number of currency that was in our economy, and now there's a lot more of that money that's in our economy. They have printed a lot more money. And so, the money reflects the GDP. It reflects the amount of transaction, the amount of value that our economy creates. And if there's more dollars available to use, but the gross domestic product, the economy is still only generating a certain amount, then that means that each dollar represents a smaller fraction of that. I can't go much farther than that. That's the extent of my knowledge of kind of how this works. But just to simplify it, that's basically what I can come up with. So anytime they give us an extra $600, $2,000, whatever the stimulus is, anytime they inject money or anytime we have to borrow more money to cover our debts, our money becomes worth a little bit less. And on average, I believe inflation's been kind of somewhere around 2% for the last 10, 15 years. That's it. I can only do 101 on these types of economics. This is not my wheelhouse. Pharmacist training here. I think most people would say I'm generally inside the bounds of what would be considered accurate. I'm sure Big Earn would add some nuance to everything that I'm saying. So caveat all this, do your own research. But I say all that to say that 2 years ago, Brad, we had a conversation talking about crypto, and I think Bitcoin was to some degree was a focus of that conversation. And in that conversation, we, both of us, are saying we're still trying to understand this. Like, what is the value of a Bitcoin, or what is the value of a cryptocurrency? Why, it seems very speculative. I'm buying it now, hoping that somebody will pay for it, pay more for it later. I'm just a little bit skeptical, and it feels like this is a manipulated market. And maybe there were a few other things that we had. People should listen to that episode. I'll reference it. I think it stands up pretty well. It's a good episode. But I noticed that you posted on Jared's Facebook post. You're saying, Jared, I'm looking at this. Where would you suggest that I go if I wanted to get more information on how this works? And I do all that just to ask you, it seems to me that you, to some degree, I'm not saying that you're a Bitcoin proponent by any means. I don't even think you own any, but it seems to me that you are more open to at least the concept than maybe you were 2 years ago. And I'm wondering internally, has anything shifted? Has your perspective on what a crypto might be at some point in the future changed? Is it based on other information you're hearing from other sources? What are your thoughts?
Wow, this will teach me to make a comment on Facebook,
No, I
huh?
do watch. I watch. I
Yeah, really.
lurk.
Goodness. Stalking. No, well, with that entire setup, to be 100% clear, absolutely nothing has changed for me. I look at myself as a lifelong learner, and I am just always, always, always looking to learn. So I think that is what is driving any remote interest in Bitcoin. I think so. As you said, speculation. I think that is a lot of what is driving, as you've seen, the price of Bitcoin has jumped dramatically in the last, certainly the last month, but in the last year for certain. And I think I swore off speculation when I had my horrible real estate failures that I've told you about, Jonathan, for years on this podcast. That basically, if you're buying an asset just hoping that it magically rises in price so you can sell it to some other sucker, that's not that's not a business, right? That's not an actual investment, that's speculation. So I think I have always looked now with a more discerning critical eye at everything because of the catastrophic mistake that I made when I was, in my early to mid 20s, and I was just stupid at that point. So, I look at people like Warren Buffett who, he basically thinks of, and not to put exact words in his mouth by any means, I know he's described Bitcoin as rat poison squared, and he he
Warren,
also
how do you really feel?
yeah, yeah, tell us. But he thinks of gold as the same thing because, and this is where I'm interpreting his words, because it doesn't produce anything. It just kind of sits there. It's this quote unquote store of value, but only because we've made it so, right? It doesn't have any real inherent purpose other than to just sit there and look shiny, right? As opposed to, and he has some quote that I could pull up, but it's something to the effect of, for like all of the gold in the world, you could put it in one like massive room and you could look at this big shiny pile, or for that same value you could have 20 Exxon Mobils, 5 Amazons, and et cetera, and buy Nebraska, to boot. So his point is those things actually produce, right? Like farmland in Nebraska, Amazon.com, like all these things actually produce something. So that's the distinction between investment and speculation. So anyway, that all said, so Jonathan, bringing it back again, I'm always looking to learn, and I think what actually prompted this was not this crazy price run up in Bitcoin. And to be perfectly candid, I did. I invested a couple $100 in Bitcoin just for fun, just to learn. So I want it to be clear that that I I am not at zero, but I am at effectively zero. But what actually interested me was we got an email from Michael Peterson, who was a guest of ours in episode 99, and it was generous giving on the path to FI. And he talked about how he managed a nonprofit in El Salvador. And what was cool was he wrote us this email just a couple of days ago saying that as part of the work in El Salvador, we've developed an economic development program using Bitcoin that was featured in Forbes. And it was this real world application of how are they using Bitcoin to run an economy, truly. And it's all done electronically. And then he went on to talk about, just things that we can't realize living in America or living in the developed West or wherever you're hearing this, that moving money back and forth for 5 billion people in the world is extraordinarily difficult and expensive, onerously expensive, to the tune of 5, 10, 20% of the money is just taken by these helpers. And I think that is what piqued my interest in the absolute like value of how can people who have no real access to the world economy, how could they run an economy based on these little, probably millions of a Bitcoin? We're not talking about these people owning billions of dollars of Bitcoin and speculating and all this other stuff. These are not techno wizards. These are people living in El Salvador who are actually using this. So again, that is what piqued my interest. And like I said, Jonathan, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I'm always looking to learn stuff. So that's kind of where I am. So does that sufficiently answer your your stalking of me on Facebook?
Yeah, sorry. I will continue to stalk. I apologize ahead of time. No, no, no. It really does. It sets it up. It sets it up really well. It does look to me like the future, in some capacity, is moving in this direction. I just want to, from my outsider perspective, and I do not own any Bitcoin. I did take a look at, Elon Musk's, Dogecoin. He has one. There are
Oh,
literally
geez, I never even heard of that.
thousands and thousands of coins out there, and the problem is, I think most of them will disappear at some point. I think that there will end up being a handful that actually have been able to prove extreme utility, and to your point, when all you can say about something is that it's a store of value, it's a somewhat weak argument because many things can be a store of value. It's whatever society decides is a store of value. We have made a decision that precious metals are a store of value. We could say that the US dollar is a store of value, one that loses a little bit of value every so often. I kind of I'm starting to, but I am also noticing there's a little bit more adoption. One, you can start to pay for things with Bitcoin. I don't like how much it moves. If the price is one Bitcoin, and you're comparing that to US dollars, in the morning, that's going to cost you 37,000. In the afternoon, it's going to cost you 26,000. Well, I probably better wait till the afternoon. That's a problem. That takes away, you need it to be stable, something that people can rely on. The point two is the utility. How many different places can you use it? Well, great. If you can use Bitcoin, but you're limited to El Salvador in this one tiny community, that's going to limit, how valuable this thing actually is. Can it be manipulated? I mean, everything's manipulated. When you hear about high frequency trading, insider trading, it's not limited to cryptos. We see that in the market. We avoid manipulation by not playing the game, index fund investing, buying when it goes up, buying when it goes down. That's our way of avoiding it. But crypto, it is clear that there is an outsized amount of power by big fish, big whales. They call them whales. And then I'm worried about like regulation. Regulation is another one. In my mind, going in the future, there is no way, like one of the dreams for Bitcoin has always been that we could get the government out of it. It's we the people. It's kind of a it doesn't rely on regulation, no government. I just can't imagine that in the future the government is going to be willing to accept something that they don't have their hands on, that they can't track, that they can't tax, that they can't put their rules on, that they can't monitor in some capacity. But having said that, Wells Fargo, beloved bank by all, just announced that they are rolling out digital wallets, right? Digital wallets. That's interesting. We're starting to talk about central bank digital currencies. And if you think about it, Brad, right now we use something called Swift that handles a lot of our international wire transfers. It is very expensive and painstaking to move large amounts of money, like we're seeing right now in this global economy. I mean, look at it personally for you and I. Let's say you have $100,000 in your investment bank, in your investments of choice, at Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, and you want to get that into your bank account so you can give it to someone else. You're talking about you sell the right amount of the shares on your investment platform. So we could use Vanguard as an example. You got to wait 2 days for the money to settle. 2 days for the money to settle. Now you want to transfer it over to your bank account. 2 days for the money to get there. That's at 4 days. Now it's the weekend. Settled on Saturday. So you can't, Saturdays don't count. Now you're back to Monday. All right, now you're on Monday. Now you can do it. I mean, this is an antiquity. That's a rotary phone. I mean, that is not going to be the future. Things are moving forward. We expect everything within 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And so I'm just kind of watching this space with a little bit of interest. I'm not a Bitcoin believer. Because I just have some real doubts about several different things. But I do think that we're going to keep seeing conversations about digital currencies. And I think the chosen one, whatever that is, will be one that is probably going to be regulated coin. It's going to be one that's energy efficient, doesn't take up the entire country of Denmark. It's going to be one that's, in terms of energy in order to work, it's going to be one that is fast. It settles quickly. It's going to be one that's inexpensive for transactions to happen. These are the types of things to start watching for to see what solutions that this crypto community actually comes up with. Because I do think we will increasingly start to see some sort of mass adoption and something that meets all of these different criteria. So anyways, I was just interested when I noticed that comment. I just wanted to have a conversation about it because I think it is just kind of we're living in the future. The future is going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely fantastic, and it'll be really cool to see what technologies actually come out of this. So thanks for humoring me on my little prompt there.
No, you bet. And I mean, I think it's important that everyone stays open minded just in life, right? Like I think that is really like a hallmark of an intelligent person. And forget this Bitcoin thing for the time being. Like, but things change, right? Like just because Jonathan, you and I have talked about certain things for a couple of years doesn't mean we're not constantly looking for new information and what the future is going to look like. The future is going to change. And I want to stay ahead of it. So whether it happens to be Bitcoin or whatever, I am always looking to learn, and I think that keeps you mentally agile and it keeps you ahead of the game. So yeah, we will obviously see. And Jonathan, just kind of closing out this first real episode here in 2021. Let's talk about just real quick. We are always talking about taking action, right? Like that is the critical aspect of what you need to do to make your life better. You can take in all the information you want, but you've got to take action. Like I was just jotting down, okay, new year, new resolutions. What can people do today to make their life a little bit better? And I just jotted down a couple super quick things like increase your contributions to your 401k by just 1%. You will never, ever, ever feel it. Just go to your website, go to HR, increase by 1%. That's one. Look at your investing options in that 401k or retirement plan or whatever it is, and look for the one with the lowest fees, the lowest expense ratio. Usually it's going to be an index fund of some type. Think about moving your new investments over to there. If you can do it with your existing funds and there's no fee, that might be something to consider as well. Another thing, just real simple, like look at your life expenses, right? Look for those nagging subscriptions that you might have signed up for 6, 12, 36 months ago. Who the hell knows? And you're just paying every single month and you don't use it, right? Look to cut something that you're just simply not getting value from. So, those are three kind of obvious ones off the top of my head. I know I wrote this in my weekly newsletter that I just maxed out my HSA account for 2021 already. People, obviously, it's a new year, new calendar year. We can start putting money into filling up those buckets of IRAs, HSAs, 401ks, all sorts of accounts, any of those 403b, 457, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, start looking into this. If you're not already maxing these things out or contributing significantly, start making moves. So yeah, Jonathan, I'm going to throw you under the bus for once. And anything jump out to mind that like somebody could do tomorrow? Just that one tiny little 1% action.
You could lower your internet cable and phone bills with Trim, if I were going to provide you a specific example. There's these companies out there that will actually call these companies and negotiate for you on your behalf. They just do this so they know the scripts that these companies are using. They know the codes that people are using and they can do it. Like I just got my prompt to update mine, and they're currently negotiating my internet package. I usually save 20 to I don't know, 20 to 30%. And what they do is they don't even charge you anything for the service. In most cases, they just take half of whatever they save you. But again, you're saving something right out the gate. That's one. You can go to choosefi.com/trim for more information on that if you're interested. They are an affiliate of ours. The other one I was going to say is, and this doesn't affect me personally. I was doing that one, but this is one that I know we've talked about it recently, but it's massive right now. A lot of people are hurting. A lot of people's jobs disappeared this past year. A lot of people are unsatisfied with their current jobs and are looking to pivot industries. We went back with Bradley Rice. He was on the show. We had an episode. We talked about how he went to part-time work and ended up doubling his salary and was making, I don't know, close to over $200,000 a year working part-time with a Salesforce career. And I went back to Bradley and did a second interview with him on my other podcast, Talent Stacker, which I put together to find out how the heck he did this. Like, what was the actual job that he was doing? How could people replicate that? The information was so compelling. We put together a job training program. We actually do a free 5-day training program just for people that want to kind of get their feet wet and see if there's something here. And then we have a paid version, which is basically you working directly with Bradley and a team to land your job within a period of 4 to 6 months. Brad, I kid you not. We are having multiple students every single week landing their actual jobs. And it looks like the actual time for people that are leaning in a big way, they're landing jobs within about 35 to 50 days from the time they start the program. Multiple people have gone from making $35,000 a year to now it looks like the average they're making is somewhere between 65 to 80,000. That's what they're making. 35 to 42 days later, retraining completely into a new industry, getting scooped up because this field is so freaking hot. And testimony after testimony after like people just sharing it because they are blown away. They actually are leaving their LinkedIn information. So like you can reach these are real people that are sharing with if you have anybody that has questions about how epic this is, just have them reach out to me. It changed my life. That's the feedback we're getting multiple times a week now in a year of incredible turmoil. This is like a bright spot in the career industry, right? People are losing their job during a pandemic, retraining and making twice as much as they were before. It's now a pattern. It's over and over again. So I would just say I don't personally need this at this point. I'm full on into entrepreneurship. I'm over here, but I am an ambassador for this. I help support it and create this because we saw the need, right? A lot of people say it's an income problem, not an expense problem. This fixes it. This isn't just a path to six. That's their first year. That's out the gate. These people have a clear path to making six figures. And within a couple of years, 3 years or so, over 200, right? It's possible. It's replicable. The roadmap is there. This could be you. If you're unsatisfied right now, don't just go take a free 5-day trial and just kind of just see if it might be a good fit. Go to choosefi.com/salesforce for more information on that.
Yeah, Jonathan, I know you've spent a lot of time and effort on this, and most importantly, you're just passionate about it, right? I mean, you are the prototypical example of, I mean, you had $168,000 in student loan debt because you thought that was the path forward, the only path forward to a six-figure career. And it's really cool to see you dive into something that you think can just genuinely help people. So yeah, it's really, really cool, really inspiring. So good job.
All full credit to Bradley and the team and all the students that are getting
Yeah.
the results for sure. But I think my role here is visibility. I wouldn't have been able. I in 1999, I would not. No matter what search I put in, I would not have stumbled on this information. And the path is so clear. But I would absolutely, if I had found this in 1999, the way that it is now, I would be at financial independence in under a decade. Easy, no like hands behind my back. It's so simple. The roadmap is so clear. It's the highest ROI fastest path to a six-figure income that is literally in existence right now, and it's replicable. It doesn't require survivor's bias, doesn't require that X factor. It requires you leaning in and doing the work, doesn't require you needing to know how to code. It requires a person that's willing to lean in and learn a new skill, and it's totally, totally doable. So, yeah, new year.
Yeah, and just to say that again, it's choosefi.com/salesforce. So choosefi.com/salesforce. That'll take you right to the 5-day Salesforce challenge that the guys created. So yeah, check that out. And Jonathan, just last thing before we close, I unfairly maligned the Washington Post earlier in the episode. That was I wasn't 100% sure, so of course I'm furiously googling in the background. So it was actually the Wall Street Journal in
Oh, it was
November
the Wall
of.
Street Journal.
Yeah,
It
right. You
was.
remember it now. Yeah, it was an article called "The New Retirement Plan: Save Almost Everything, Spend Virtually Nothing," and it was just it wasn't the most complimentary piece on the FIRE movement, to put it mildly. But I was actually thinking about an article a couple of weeks later that Michelle Singletary, the finance columnist from the Washington Post, put out about the three myths about this early retirement movement in rebuttal, in essence, to that Wall Street Journal article. So sorry, WAPO, I'm a subscriber, so sorry about that.
Oh, there we go. All right. Well, it's all right, guys. Well, the fire is spreading. This is a year of that if you made it to this year, then man, you've got it, right? Like if you made it through 2021 and you're in a place where your head's not in the sand right now, you're listening to this episode, it's because you've already made the decision I'm going to seize the day. So let's do that, right? Let's do that. There is no they, or at least there's maybe not a they, but there's definitely a you. There's a you and you've got this. The fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.